A few of them have the capacity and potential motivation to give way more to your charity than the rest. Because sometimes if we're struggling to get results, we at some level think, oh, well, I'm not very good at this. And that person over there who's doing well, they must be clever or they must be talented. Actually, I've noticed it's rarely that. And I say this in my book. If someone's raising more money than you, it's unlikely that they're necessarily more talented or even more lucky. I really think they're just doing different things and focusing their energy on solving different problems than you are. You'll find it's weirdly powerful in helping you get great insights quickly. But the other thing is it's quite fun. It's enjoyable. Hello and welcome to the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This is episode 153. And this is a show for fundraisers who want ideas and maybe a little dose of inspiration to help you raise more money and really enjoy your job. This time, I'm again joined by my friend and colleague, Ben Swart from Swart. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hello, Rob. I'm very good, thank you. And I'm particularly pleased to be back having this conversation again. Mainly because last time I found it really helpful to reflect on the challenges that many fundraisers tell me, and then hear some of the interesting, unexpected, and to be honest, Rob, quite motivating ideas and examples that you then come back with. So I'm going to keep doing that, if that's okay.
Yeah, crack on, Ben. You and I were chatting the other day about some of these ongoing challenges that just will always remain difficult for many fundraisers, and you wanted to have a chat about one of those.
Yes, Rob. So this is a problem that so many fundraisers that I speak to have. And, you know, the easiest way to explain it is to rewind the clock about 10 years ago. And when I became head of new business at the NSPCC, within a matter of weeks, our then chairman sent a note to the CEO that went to me that asked me to write a letter to every single company on the FTSE 250 and ask them for a gift or a partnership. And so we drafted these letters. And at the time, I knew I had to do it because he'd asked, or it felt like I needed to. But it felt wrong to be going after every single company in the way, just because of a ranking on their wealth.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Ben, but it's kind of like an approach to finding a job where you send your CV to, 30, 40 companies or whatever, and it's almost impossible to make them really high quality and tune in to the reality of what the hiring company may or may not be looking for. And Paul Knott and other excellent recruiters I've spoken to tend to advise against, if all else fails, like throw enough stones, one might hit a target. But generally speaking, I think recruiters and people who are excellent at job hunting advice tend not to recommend that scattergun approach.
Yeah, it's the same as the LinkedIn message that flies around quite often that says, things I've been told to do as a fundraiser. And it's, have you thought about contacting the rich list yet? And it is, but truthfully, we know in reality, I think, that that's not what we should be doing. But what is it that we should be doing? And I love, many years ago, you helped me, and at the moment you help lots of people to solve that challenge. What are some things that you've noticed?
Okay, one of my favourite stories is with the wonderful Tony Gaston. Listeners to our podcast may remember the chat I had with Tony because we re-released it quite recently. I actually spoke to him about 4 years ago, and he attended our second ever Major Gifts Mastery program. And all those years ago, he was new to fundraising, but he was hungry to learn, and he worked for a small international development charity. And in that first year, his charity, I think, ad hoc had received one or two gifts totaling £20,000. He came on Major Gifts Mastery, was really hungry to learn, applied lots of the fundamentals that we teach on Major Gifts Mastery. His results went up considerably that first year. And interestingly, the line kept growing more and more, and the benefits kept compounding to the extent that across the next 5 years, between 2013 and 2018, it went steadily up. And in that fifth year, his charity was receiving almost £2 million per year in high value, i.e., especially major gifts and some trusts and foundations giving. And in the podcast, one of the key themes from the whole chat, in fact, it's 2 chats, was he found a way to focus disproportionate energy on relatively few of the people that were on his donor file. Said differently, it's again this our old friend, the 80-20 principle. Relatively few of your donors who care about your cause, relatively few of the companies you could be approaching to partner with you, relatively few of the trusts, even relatively few of the Rotary clubs, relatively few of the marathon runners. A few of them have the capacity and potential motivation to give way more to your charity than the rest. And what's interesting about that is it tends to fly against the way organizations and even just the human brain usually approaches. We know that some people have a bit more money than others, or a lot more, but at some level we end up treating them pretty much the same. We might give a bit more attention to one person who's just been generous, but strategically, proactively, in advance, rarely are fundraising teams, I think, as skewed, as disproportionate in the way they approach sources of income and partnership as they really could be.
And I've noticed that on the course, we talk about lots of different strategies to help you say, instead of going for everyone, how do I find that top 20%? I think of when I was talking to someone from Marks and Spencer's about how much energy they put into focusing on exactly who their target market is, like exactly who is the equivalent of their top prospects. And he said, we sell a lot of clothes, we sell to lots of different people. I'm not saying that we don't sell to everyone, but we are 100% clear on who our audience is. And Ben, I need you to get 100% clear on who is your charity, and therefore who are the companies, who are the audiences, who are the people. I know fewer, bigger, better. Who are the ones that you can help and they can help you? And he's really clear on it, and it changes the way he focuses and some actions that he does. I get a sense that over the last few months even, Rob, and years, you've noticed when people do get clear on who they're after, it changes their state, their habits, and their results. So there are other examples you've got on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just before I go into that, I think it's worth pausing to look at people who are really good at things, including looking at the things that you, our listeners, are really good at. Because sometimes if we're struggling to get results, we at some level think, oh, well, I'm not very good at this. And that person over there who's doing well, they must be clever or they must be talented. Actually, I've noticed it's rarely that. And I say this in my book. If someone's raising more money than you, it's unlikely that they're necessarily more talented or even more lucky. I really think they're just doing different things and focusing their energy on different things and on solving different problems than you are. That's not the same as talent. Crucially, because that's learnable. If you just study what it is they think about at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning and what kinds of tactics they do to handle that opportunity or problem, then most of those things are learnable and practicable. In the same way that, I don't know if any of our listeners have a favourite musician, artist, actor, or sports star they love to follow. But if you think of, someone who is clearly very good at their craft, like Serena Williams or Roger Federer, how did they get so good? Well, practice. Yes, practicing enthusiastically.
Yeah.
And in a particular effectiveness of practice, week after week after week, year after year, all of that compounds. So far, so obvious. But what do they practice? As far as I'm aware, if you're Serena or Roger and you want to get better at tennis today, I don't think you go out and spend 3 hours just trying to get better at tennis. I think probably what you do, hopefully in conversation with your coach, is you say, I'm going to spend 45 minutes just working on my second serve. And maybe even more focused, my second serve on that side of the court with that spin on it. And then you're going to spend another hour or two just working on your backhand volley or whatever. So you chunk things down. The same is true of people who get really good at music, for instance. When you study the learning of skill, psychologists have shown that those who really master a craft, they don't try to get better at everything at the same time. They zoom right in on the first 12 bars of this difficult piece. And they do it over and over again, and they slow it right down. And in doing that, something that seemed super complex and difficult becomes learnable and improvable. The punchline to all of that, skill development, I think, is focus is power. The challenge for fundraisers is we're so often under pressure to get better at lots of things at the same time that rarely do we make time to just zoom in and give all of our 100% attention on solving one important, difficult problem. But for instance, in your own life, if you can think of something you are very good at, you don't have to consider yourself a gold medalist or winning Wimbledon, but there are things you're very good at, be it a hobby or a particular element of your job or a personal skill like being a good friend or being a good listener. Whatever it is you're better than many people at, how did you do it? I'm guessing you probably gave a lot of attention. A, you care about it, but B, over time, you've repeatedly given it your attention. And over time, you've got better at it, and you're much better at it now, A, than many other people you know, and B, than you used to be. So, focus is power. How do we apply this to raising more money? Well, lots of ways, but for instance, in major gift fundraising, similar to the approach to getting a good job, better to do 2 or 3 high quality job applications than send out 50 CVs that are not tailored. If you have a file of major donors, get super clear or regularly ask yourself, who are the potential top 3, 4, 5, 6 supporters in terms of their past giving and in the signals they've ever sent in how much they care, and their signals we can read from them in how generous they potentially could be and their capacity to give at a high level. At some level, even without a system, you probably could in 15 minutes have a pretty good guess. I mean, by all means do more research, but a pretty good guess as to who those top 4, 5, 6, 7 donors are. And then secondly, in any given week, give some focused thinking time to one of those at a time. Don't try and solve all 7 at once. Get one donor who's in your file who does or could support you and give them clear thinking time, asking yourself the question, how could we better deepen a wonderful relationship with this person who does or could care about this cause? And if all you do is go to a coffee shop for 25 minutes a week and just focus on that one person and that question with your notebook, potentially having looked at the file first, I think you'll be amazed at how things that before seemed really hard to solve, you'll just spot a pattern or something right under your nose or something that she said to you the first time you ever met her, or something that appears to be difficult because you've sent 3 emails to her and she appears to have ignored them, but you'll just spot maybe she ignored them because she's super busy, or maybe she ignored them because she doesn't like going to events and all 3 of them were an invitation to an event. Some things which appeared to be they're ignoring me, you'll realise they are what they are, and this is just a busy person. What else could I try? And you'll probably think of 2 or 3 new ideas you could try with relatively little effort. Or maybe something that is more effort, like going out and seeking out your chief exec and asking them to make the phone call or sign the letter, or even, heaven forbid, make a little 2-minute film thanking that donor, naming them. I'm not saying you need to do that, but I am saying if you've given this donor 20 minutes, 25 minutes of your attention, and you've tuned back into how much they care and the fact that they've already given quite generously before to that Christmas appeal, more generously than anyone else, you'll reconnect to what a wonderful, great thing this could be for both parties. And therefore you'll have the motivation and the rationale to maybe do a more difficult thing, like make a bespoke thanking film, or, have an extra conversation with one of your colleagues who works at the front line to ask them to help you put something special together. So both in terms of technique you could do that's easier, or something that's really higher touch and more effort, more likely to tune into the motivation for why that makes sense. And on our Major Gifts Mastery program, even more powerfully, if you have the luxury of having some colleagues, I know many of our listeners are working on their own, but if you've got some colleagues who are fundraisers, one of the most powerful things we teach you, we show you how to do, is how to do a 20-minute focused thinking session just about that supporter. Not how could we get some money, but what do we know about them? If we really wanted to improve the relationship in the next 6 weeks, what are various things we could do? Now, beware. Unless you're careful, those go wrong because the other two people in the thinking group will jump in with their good advice within 2 minutes of you starting to talk, and you might feel under pressure or defensive. I'm giving too much away here of how I felt doing something similar to that at a children's charity I once worked for. And honestly, it wasn't managed very well, so that the person who was supposed to be helped, the fundraiser, who knew most about the donor, actually felt under pressure and defensive because other people were giving them advice about what they could and should do. So it often, unless you're careful with how you set it up, these little thinking, action learning sets don't increase the quality of thought and, crucially, the confidence of the fundraiser to go out and take action or pick up the phone. So beware, there's a way to maximize the enjoyment and quality of thought and confidence boosting effect of this. We really show you exactly how to do it on Major Gifts Mastery. But anyway, it's still 20 minutes focusing on just one supporter who could make a wonderful difference. We found it really has an amazing power to cause you to find time to do extra things in any given week, compared to if you don't remember this 80-20 principle, this idea of focus is power.
But what do we do if they say, look, Ben, I'm looking at my diary now. It's absolutely chock-a-block. Like, how do I find that time in that cafe, Rob? What can I do to help myself choose, because it's choices, choose to put that time in and actually be assertive enough to say no to some other things? What's your advice to that fundraiser?
I've got a couple of ideas, Ben. One of them is coloured pens. I think, maybe not everyone, but many of our listeners, if they did A-levels, if they went to college, if they went to university, when revising for exams, they initially found it rather difficult and they had to find a way to revise more information more efficiently. This is certainly talking about me. And I've found that many people at some point in their life discovered mind mapping as a way that works with the brain to help you just work with the stream of consciousness of how your brain actually thinks, rather than in a linear way or a spoken out loud verbal way all the time. And mind mapping is a very powerful way of distilling lots of information that you could potentially put in an essay question or you need to revise for your exam. When you mind map it, as in you draw it and you put things on in bubbles and on lines and you use colour and you create little pictures, it has an amazing power to help your brain solve things and distill things and remember things and to spot patterns in a way that linear black and white notes don't. One thing, especially if you're a fundraiser on your own, is to get some coloured pens, get a notebook, and just experiment with what happens if you, in the centre of the book, ask yourself the question, how could I possibly improve and deepen my relationship with this company or this potential supporter? And then you get your favourite coffee and you pause and you just start scribbling, drawing, doodling. But if you just do that as an experiment, I predict most of you will find it's weirdly powerful in thinking clearly, a little bit like when those detectives on those crime dramas make a visual map with string and photos and names. You find it's weirdly powerful in helping you get great insights quickly. But the other thing is it's quite fun. It's enjoyable. And if you just do it once, you'll discover that it was enjoyable, not stressful, and productive. And therefore, I think it'll just be way easier for you to next time make time to go and do this high quality thinking thing. Secondly, especially in corporate fundraising, one of the great things we recommend is that you create a so-called Dream 10 at its simplest, rather than have a spreadsheet in your computer of the 142 companies that have ever sent us £25 or £150 at Christmas time and that be your prospect list. I really recommend there's a power to choosing the 10 or 12 companies that you as a corporate fundraiser are proactively wanting to spend more time with. Some of them might be existing partners. Some of them are probably new partners that are not thinking about you, but you just see that it makes sense. The act of creating that kind of wanted poster, that Dream 10 list. If you've seen my sessions at Breakfast Club or on my training courses, sometimes I show you an example where other smart fundraisers have done this one-page poster and it's got the 10 logos on it. And in all kinds of ways, it's a wonderful prop. When I think back to all the wonderful successes that corporate fundraisers have had in the last year or two, when they come on our Corporate Partnerships Mastery program, and, last year, a brilliant fundraiser called Asia, a hospital charity. She was fairly new to fundraising. When she came on the program, I think they already had one partner, but by the end of the program, 6 months later, they had 8 partners. And then 2 months later, when I spoke to her to interview her, they were up to 10 partners. So, in 7 or 8 months, she'd won 9 new partnerships, each of them worth at least £10,000. When I think of Jordan last year from a heritage charity, on day one, they'd only ever, I think, had partnerships worth 10, 20, 30,000 pounds. Her dream was to get one worth more than £100,000. And by day 3, day 4, she had secured that way larger partner that she'd put on her Dream 10 list on day 1. Those kinds of results are impossible or almost impossible if you are not focusing your energies and your chances of solving the problems, and also finding relationships to get a first, second and third coffee with these partners. You just can't do that. When I spoke to Lily from another hospital charity last year, amazing, extraordinary result of, in February, a gift of $1 million, £800,000. And I said, how on earth did you do it? And she said, well, it was all that energy in November and December, just adding value to relatively few companies, to my Dream 10. And crucially, some of the things I did were really quite small. It was just extra stuff on LinkedIn to comment on posts by certain people at those companies to deepen and warm up those relationships. Because I had only 10 of them I was giving my attention to, I was able to keep adding value, improving, spotting extra patterns, extra opportunities. And on this occasion, she got super lucky, and it was, $1 million. I'm not saying, listener, that that's going to happen to all of you, but I am saying it's hard for you to get more valuable wins unless you find a way to focus your attention on relatively fewer companies and obviously have a strategy to thank and steward all the other companies too. Send them a newsletter. Obviously, do great stewardship for the other 80 or 90% of your major donors or Rotary clubs or whatever it might be. Don't ignore them, but in any given week, if you want to really achieve growth, I think focus is part of how you do that.
I love these examples, Rob. And it makes me think of so many different times in my career where it took us a few years to win some of the biggest partnerships we'd ever have. And those were names that were logos, that were on boards, that were in the office, that were shared with people, that were in my mind, that were talked through. And it did just crystallize us to focus far more. And there's so many examples of where people have done that. And you can, the other week I was talking to somebody who, after day 1 of the mastery, so they'd learnt Dream 10, let me figure out who, and then they'd learnt some ideas to get in front of them, test drives, conversations. They'd gone away and they'd created their Dream 10 on a piece of paper. And when they came back, they were holding it. They were holding the Dream 10 piece of paper. And we were talking, and the number of test drives, the number of conversations they had compared to other people was extraordinary. And it didn't surprise me because they had this printed out logo board that they had on their pad that they've been talking, for the last 8 weeks. This is what they've been talking to people about constantly. And of course, that's going to shift your focus. Do you know a question that I used to ask my team about this to do with, but Ben, there's so many companies, is let's fast forward a year then. Let's say everything's gone really well, really, really well. You're going to get better at your job. You're going to get more conversations. You're going to get in front of them. They're going to understand why a partnership is a great idea for them and for you. Do you want the company that understands this and chooses to partner with you, do you want them to be one of the ones that are in your top 10 or top 15? Or do you want it to be the one that's giving £3,000 and is taking just as much time and energy? Because I can tell you, when I first got the job and I started writing letters to 250 companies, some of them bit, but they were the smallest. And we were really reactive. And in the end, 6 months on, the team and some people and myself were using so much energy on partners that were not in the top 2% or 5%, but were in the bottom. And that pain has never left me. And if you haven't experienced that pain, then I, as the team leader, my job was, you're going to, like, where do you want to be in a year's time? Do we want this company that could transform what we do to help people to be partnered with us and all your time and energy there? Or do we want it to be spread across 8 or 10 that can't do? For me, that helped me. It's different for different people, but that really helped me to say, right, well, in 9 months' time, things are going to go well. Who do I want them to go well with? This company or these companies?
Yeah. Actually, there is some challenge to how you choose the 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And I think we don't have time in this show to really go into that system because there are nuances to it. So we do that in depth all afternoon on day one of Corporate Mastery. But assuming you can choose a 10, just the reason it works is our colleagues and our friends and our trustees are better connected than most of us are aware. The challenge is many corporate fundraisers have in the past asked their trustees or their senior team or their colleagues for help, but the question has been too open-ended, not specific enough. Do you know any companies that might want to partner with us? And people want to help, but without specificity, they sort of nod and smile and can't quite think of anything. Do you know anyone who works in any of these 10 companies? If so, I'd love to chat to you to see if you could set up a chat for me. And dear listener, if that's all you get from this conversation, I promise you will experience different results from your colleagues when you ask that question compared to the default one.
Yeah, I love that, Rob. And I know from the conversations I've had with many fundraisers, if their challenge was, gosh, Ben, I'm just not sure how best to use my time when there's so many companies or donors to go for, I hope the chat we've just had will have helped them. And if they want more information, what should they do?
Well, if you possibly can, I would find a way, even if it's not this year, sooner or later, find a way to get onto either Major Gifts Mastery or Corporate Partnerships Mastery. I say this because after 10 years of running these programs, it's not only the techniques, it's also crucially being part of a group of other people who are trying it out bravely and creatively and feeding back to each other across the 6 months of what's working. And because of that, it makes such a difference to your confidence to actually A, try some different things, and B, the harder thing, persuade your colleagues who you may need permission from to do these things. You just get so certain and confident that this is a smarter, easier way to raise more money that you end up taking more action. And when you take more of the right kinds of actions, you don't get lucky every time, but sooner or later, these fundamental good sense principles just do pay off. So if you can find a way to get on either of our mastery programs, I would recommend you do that. If not, I hope that today's content, examples and tactics already will serve you in whatever way you choose to zoom in on a relatively small area of your fundraising or small part of your donor pool and see what happens when you give your own extra deeper attention, asking a helpful question, not how can I get some money, but how can I add value? How could I increase the chances that they'll meet me? How could I help them enjoy giving? How could I help them feel inspired? If you ask those better questions on your own or with colleagues, you'll get some answers. So best of luck. I really hope this chat has helped. As always, we will share a transcript of this conversation and a short summary in the episode notes on the podcast section of our website. Thank you to everybody who is always so generous and proactive in spreading the word. So if the episode was helpful to you, we'd be ever so grateful if you're able to share it on and spread the word to your colleagues or on social media. If you want to find out more about our mastery programs, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services. A huge thank you as ever to my colleague Ben for coming along and sharing your take on this really important topic. But most of all, thank you to you, the listener, for continuing to make time to learn. I really hope it's paying off. And best of luck with your fundraising. Bye-bye.